The brother who was once my hero tried to kiss my fiancée at a family gathering. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, just alcohol, but soon after, I caught him trying to rape her. I beat him nearly to death. My parents continued to support him behind my back, even when I gathered evidence. We were both in college when we first met, me, 27, and my fiancée, 25. We were introduced through mutual friends, and about a year later, we started dating. When I introduced her to my family, everyone adored her. Even my mother, who was usually quite reserved about outsiders, welcomed her warmly. For context, my parents are immigrants, and since moving to this country, they have always stuck closely to our community. They tend to be wary of people outside it, so my mom's acceptance of my fiancé was a big deal. Now, I need to mention my older brother, 29. Before everything that happened, he was my hero. I admired him because he was fearless, never afraid of the local guys, always standing up for himself, me, and our younger sister, who's 22. He constantly reminded us not to bow our heads just because people treated us differently. He said we had just as much right to be here as anyone else. When he met my girlfriend, they got along well. Over time, she became close with my entire family, especially my brother and sister. She would shop with my mom and sister, play pool with me and my cousins, and attend every family gathering. At one of these gatherings, we all got wasted. I was so drunk I passed out on the floor in my parents' living room. After the party ended, my fiancée started acting strange. When I asked her what was wrong, she hesitated before saying, "I think your brother tried to kiss me." Her words sobered me up instantly. I asked her to tell me everything. She explained that a few people had gone up to the roof to drink and get some fresh air. Eventually, everyone left except for her and my brother. They had a couple more drinks, chatted for a bit, and then she noticed him staring at her. Out of nowhere, he leaned in to kiss her. But she was quick. She pulled away just in time. The air turned unbearably tense, and she left immediately. After she finished, I drove her home and then confronted my brother. He admitted it, saying he was so drunk he didn't even realize what he was doing. He apologized over and over. At the time, I was angry, but I convinced myself it was just a stupid, drunken mistake, something that could be settled with a conversation and clear boundaries. I had no idea how wrong I was. After that night, my relationship with my brother changed. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was painfully polite, like we were strangers. The only other person who knew what had happened was my younger sister. One day, while talking to my fiancé, my sister asked why my brother and I had grown distant. My fiancé told her the truth. We had chosen not to tell the rest of the family to avoid making things worse. Months later, my mother threw another party, big, loud, full of family, friends, and people from our community. My fiancé was there, and so was my brother. I thought enough time had passed for things to be civil between them. Maybe this could be the first step in moving past what happened. At some point in the night, I lost track of her. I looked everywhere, but she was nowhere to be found. I figured she might be with my sister, but something told me to check upstairs. As I climbed the steps, I heard muffled noises coming from one of the rooms. I opened the door. My brother was on top of her, pinning her to the bed, one hand over her mouth, the other trying to push up her dress. She was struggling, trying to fight him off. I didn't think. I just acted. I launched myself at him, punching, hitting, doing everything I could to hurt him. My fiancée ran out of the room as fast as she could, screaming for help. By the time my father and uncle rushed upstairs, I was still beating him. My father pulled me off, but I kept cursing at my brother, trying to go at him again. It took everything in my father's power to hold me back. Finally, when the chaos settled, my father stared at me, eyes dark with confusion. "What the hell is going on?" he asked. I took a breath, trying to find the words. Then I told him. I told him what I had just seen, what my brother had just tried to do. Silence. My father sat down, head in his hands, breathing heavily. For 10 long minutes, no one said a word. Then my uncles helped my father carry my brother to the hospital. After they left, I went looking for my fiancée. I found her with my sister, crying and shaking. I told my sister goodbye, and we left. She cried the entire way home. She was overwhelmed, furious, broken. When we finally got back, she collapsed onto the bed and sobbed until she fell asleep. For days, she barely spoke. Crying became her routine. She was drained, barely functioning. Slowly, she started finding her voice again. Meanwhile, my family kept me updated on my brother's condition, I had broken his nose and dislocated his jaw. My mother was in complete denial, refusing to believe that her son could do something so vile. I didn't dwell on it. People react to trauma differently. In a way, I even understood why she tried to justify his actions. The last thing I heard about him was that after leaving the hospital, people turned their backs on him. He lost his job and left town. The following weeks, I cut off almost all contact with the outside world, focusing solely on my fiancée. She was handling it as best as she could, but the fear still gripped her. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. She stayed home for nearly a month before finally deciding to return to work. But just a few hours in, she came back, shaken. She told me she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being in danger, that at any moment, someone could hurt her. First update. Hey everyone. Honestly, I never thought I'd write an update. I just wanted to get my emotions out. But the amount of support I received was overwhelming. I wanted to clear up some things. First, many of you seem to think I was considering forgiving my brother. That will never happen. To be perfectly clear, I don't have a brother anymore. That man is dead to me. Second, not everyone in my family believes my brother should be forgiven. Only a few do, and I have no problem cutting those people out of my life. The only ones I truly care about are my parents. My sister, on the other hand, is completely on my side. She's my fiancé's best friend and the only other person who fully understands what she went through in the first month after the assault. Third, many people asked what I told my parents. I made it very clear, if I ever find out that my brother is back in town, I will never speak to them again. As for what my brother has been up to, according to my mother, he reached out to her at the start of the pandemic. He had moved across the country, changed his name, and started therapy in an attempt to become a better person. Bullshit. I didn't ask for more details, and neither did my sister. That's all we know. Some of you messaged me privately, asking why my brother wasn't in prison. I replied to a few, but I'll explain it here too. The main reason? I beat him so badly that he had to be hospitalized. When I consulted a lawyer friend, she told me that if I pressed charges, he could countersue for assault. That meant I would end up serving time, and my fiancée would have to testify, which she wasn't emotionally ready for. My only priority at the time was supporting her, and I couldn't do that from behind bars. The best we could do was get a restraining order. That's also why I haven't updated until now, because we were working on finalizing it. I never told my parents about it, so if my brother ever showed up, he'd be arrested on the spot. Some people pointed out something that shook me to my core. In my last post, I mentioned that my brother felt confident enough to try and rape my fiancée in a house full of people. That level of boldness made some of you wonder, had he done this before? Worse, had my parents covered for him? That thought terrified me. I had never considered it before. The idea that my brother might have a history of this, that my parents might have known, made me sick. I couldn't stop thinking about it. My fiancée noticed and asked what was on my mind. When I told her, a chill ran down her spine. We decided to talk to my sister first, then started reaching out to other family members, those who supported us. We also spoke to close friends and members of our community, asking if anyone had noticed anything off about my brother before the attack. So far, no one in my family recalled him acting this way. But with our friends, the response was different. Some of them admitted that my brother had a pattern of being overly friendly with their girlfriends or wives, that he was sometimes too persistent. But no one had ever suspected something as serious as attempted rape. I don't know what to do with this information yet, but I know one thing. I'm never letting my guard down again. My sister reached out to the sister of my brother's ex-girlfriend. What she told us changed everything. She said that when my brother was dating her sister, his behavior around their family was off. He made them uncomfortable, but no one could quite put a finger on why. The ex-girlfriend, in particular, would go completely silent whenever he was around. Even worse, he had been excessively flirty with her sister. Then we spoke to one of my brother's former coworkers. She told us about a corporate party where he left with a drunk female colleague. The next morning, that woman barely remembered a thing. Hearing this, I finally understood something. My brother had never been the person I thought he was. He wasn't a good man who made a single mistake. He was dangerous. From that moment on, everyone involved in uncovering the truth began gathering as much evidence as possible. We were determined to expose him to our community, online, and to anyone who needed to know. I hadn't spoken to my parents about any of this yet, but I planned to. The next morning, I would tell them everything and give them an ultimatum. They either stood by me and my sister, or they stood by him. If I found out that anyone had known about his past actions and kept silent, they wouldn't escape the consequences either. For now, I won't be updating further. Not until my brother finally faces the punishment he deserves. This isn't how I imagined the first few weeks of my engagement. But I can't ignore this. My fiancée has been by my side every step of the way. I've done everything I can to support her, but I can't even begin to understand how she feels. All I know is that I'm proud of her, for standing up to her trauma, not just for herself, but for others who might be in danger too. Hey everyone, it's been a while. I wanted to wait until everything was settled before posting another update. It's not over yet, but I'm relieved to say that my brother is finally facing justice. After my last post, my fiancé, some friends, and I started digging deeper into my brother's past. We found 8 different cases, women he had harassed, manipulated, or assaulted. Some were ex-girlfriends. Some were former co-workers. 2 were his current colleagues. I originally planned to confront my parents with the evidence, hoping they'd finally see him for what he was. I also wanted to expose everything publicly, making sure my brother could never hide from what he had done. But I didn't. Our lawyer warned me against it. If I told my parents, there was a real possibility they'd try to protect him and sabotage what we were planning. At that point, I couldn't trust them anymore. Not after considering the horrifying possibility that they may have known all along. As for posting online, it could have backfired. My brother could have sued for defamation, delaying real justice. So, instead, we built a solid case against him. In the meantime, I cut off all contact with my parents. I wasn't going to let them interfere. My sister pretended to stay neutral, but in reality, she was secretly helping us. She managed to track down what my brother had been doing since he fled. Turns out, after the party incident, he moved across the country to stay with an old friend. At first, my family did the right thing and cut him off. But once he settled into his new life, he began spinning a different story. He told everyone that our family had abandoned him because we found out about his affair with my fiancée. Yeah, he actually had the audacity to tell people that, because we never pressed charges, there was no official record of what happened that night, which meant my brother was free to rewrite history however he wanted. That's how he was able to find work, rebuild his life, and gain sympathy from people who had no idea who he really was. The first time he reached out to my parents was at the end of 2020, during the worst part of the pandemic. Since then, he and my mother have been in regular contact. My parents even visited him multiple times. And then, the worst news of all, my brother has a daughter. She was born from a one-night stand. The mother got pregnant in April 2021, and they decided to co-parent without marrying. My niece was born in December 2021. And yes, my parents and my sister have met her. They knew. They fucking knew. And they said nothing. I wish I could say I was surprised. But at this point, I've stopped expecting anything from them. My sister reached out to the sister of my brother's ex-girlfriend, and what we learned only confirmed my worst fears. She told us that when my brother was dating her sister, there was always something unsettling about him. Her sister would go completely silent in his presence, shrinking into herself, and disturbingly, my brother had also been inappropriately flirty with his ex's sister. We kept digging. We contacted one of his former co-workers, and she told us something even worse. At a corporate party, my brother left with a heavily intoxicated female colleague. The next morning, that woman could barely remember what had happened. Hearing these stories made me realize something painful. My brother was never the man I thought he was. He was a predator. He was a danger to anyone around him. Since yesterday, everyone involved has been gathering as much evidence as possible. When we're ready, we plan to expose him, to our community, online, and to everyone who deserves to know the truth. I haven't spoken to my parents about this yet, but tomorrow morning, I will. I'll tell them everything and give them an ultimatum. If anyone in my family knew about my brother's past and stayed silent, they will face consequences too. I don't know when I'll be able to update again. Not until my brother finally faces justice. This isn't how I imagined the first few weeks of my engagement. But I can't ignore this. My fiancée has stood beside me through it all, and I've tried to be there for her in return. I can't begin to understand how she feels, but I'm proud of her for facing her trauma head-on if it means protecting others. Hey everyone, it's been a while. I wanted to wait until the situation was truly settled before posting again. It's not fully over yet, but I can finally say my brother is facing justice. After my last update, my fiancé, a few friends, and I kept investigating. We needed to know just how deep this went, how many other women had suffered because of him. When all was said and done, we found 8 different cases. 8 women, former girlfriends, past and current colleagues, who had experienced harassment or worse at my brother's hands. My fiancé was just one of them. Originally, my plan was to confront my parents with all the evidence, to force them to see the monster they had been protecting. I also wanted to expose him publicly, but I never did. Our lawyer stopped me. He warned that telling my parents could be a mistake. If they found out before we took legal action, there was a real chance they'd try to shield my brother, sabotaging everything we were working for. At that point, I had already stopped trusting them. There was even a terrifying possibility that they had covered for him before. As for posting everything online, our lawyer also advised against it. If we weren't careful, my brother could turn the tables and sue for defamation. That would make real justice harder, not easier. So I cut my parents off completely. I stopped speaking to them, ensuring they couldn't interfere. My sister, though, played a crucial role. She pretended to stay neutral, but in reality, she was helping me and my fiancé. She dug into my brother's life and uncovered everything. After the incident at the party, my brother moved across the country, staying with an old friend. At first, my family did the right thing. They shut him out. But eventually, he began rewriting history. He told everyone that our family had abandoned him because we found out about his affair with my fiancé. Yes, you read that right. The bastard had the nerve to claim he and my fiancé had been having an affair behind my back. Since we never pressed charges, there was no official record of what happened that night. So in his new life, he twisted the narrative, painting himself as the victim. That's how he was able to find work, rebuild his life, and manipulate people into feeling sorry for him. The first time he reached out to my parents was at the end of 2020, during the worst period of the pandemic. Since then, my mother has been in regular contact with him. My parents even visited him multiple times. And then we found out something that made me sick. My brother has a daughter. She was born from a one-night stand. The mother got pregnant in April 2021, and they decided to co-parent without getting married. My niece was born in December 2021. And yes, my parents and my sister have known about her all along. They met his girlfriend. They met his daughter. They continued their relationship with him in secret while lying to me and pretending to be on my side. I wish I could say I was shocked, but honestly, I stopped expecting anything from them a long time ago. Final reckoning. My sister reached out to the sister of my brother's ex-girlfriend, and what we learned confirmed my worst fears. She told us that when my brother was dating her sister, there was always something unsettling about him. Her sister would go completely silent in his presence, avoiding eye contact, shrinking into herself. Even worse, my brother had been inappropriately flirty with her sister. We kept digging.